These Dickensian cuts belong to a different era and a different party. They are far from what this Labour Party is for, a party to protect the poor, as is my purpose. For I am my brother's keeper. These are my constituents, my neighbours, my community, my responsibility, and I cannot cross by on the other side. For one, let alone for the 150,000 who will be pushed further into poverty. And as so many of us fear, and as the evidence shows, since 600 people took their lives under the Tories' brutal reforms, the tragedy of this ideology could be worse. So I will fight for the purpose of politics, for their livelihoods and their lives. It is a matter of conscience, deep conscience for me, to ensure that these precious people are treated for once with dignity, so they matter for being and not just doing. 16 million, they beg, in the chaos and confusion, where the sequence of consultations makes no sense to them or no sense to me, and I think, if we're honest, no sense to any of us in this bill, to just stop and start again with listening to their voices. So at this 11th hour, I plead withdrawal.
Now, it's clear that our punitive and broken welfare system needs reform, yes. It drives disabled people into poverty. But proper consultation should have taken place with those most directly affected to build a system that truly nurtures. It didn't happen. The government should have published assessments on the impact of these updated proposals on the poverty of future claimants, those undergoing reassessment and carers. They haven't. The government should have assessed the knock-on impact on local authorities, the NHS, the charity sector, and the scope for non-payment of household debts as people pushed into poverty desperately seek help elsewhere. They haven't. So we're being asked to vote on a bill today to rush it through without consultation nor knowing the full picture, and that can't be right. And if this is about cost, whilst I recognise the financial challenges facing the government, challenges that are a direct result of 14 years of mismanagement and underinvestment by the previous government, the sad thing is that there are alternatives. Introduce higher taxes on extreme wealth. End the stealth subsidies for banks. Tax gambling fairly and properly. The list of alternatives is endless, because every single disability organisation is against this brutal bill.
The principles of this bill are wrong. This is the wrong bill at the wrong time that is going to attack people and make their lives worse. This is cutting money from disabled people. This is driven entirely by the need to make cuts. This is not driven by the need to make the welfare system better. If, for example, the issue is that the PIP numbers are spiralling out of control, maybe the government could concede that perhaps there are more disabled people than there were before. Perhaps there are more people that need additional support. I mean, I would say that the numbers of people on the state pension increases at larger than the size of Leicester every year. Perhaps that's because there are more older people than there were in the previous year. Perhaps it's because more people are struggling to make change, to live their lives. Perhaps it's because, as Scope said, £1,095 a month is the additional cost of living with a disability. If this is a Labour government that is on the left, if this is a Labour government that cares about making people's lives better, if their principles are of the party that created the welfare state, that created the social security safety net, why are they now choosing to dismantle it? Why are they now choosing to go for disabled people with these savings, when actually there's lots and lots of other things. There's lots of other ways they could make savings. They could scrap their self-imposed fiscal rules. They could choose to have a more progressive taxation system. They could choose to levy this £2 billion or £5 billion, however much it is today, of savings on someone other than those people who are already struggling.
And we're being asked today to vote on the principles of the bill. So I think all honourable members on this side should be very clear about what the principles of the bill is. It's on the face of the bill. It says, and to restrict eligibility for the personal independence payment. That's the purpose of the bill. I didn't come, and I know my colleagues didn't come into Labour politics in order to restrict eligibility for personal independence payments. When I think about what we're going to be asked to vote for or against tonight, I think not just of my colleagues in here, but I think of the disabled people who come to my constituency advice surgeries. I think of the disabled people who had hope in their hearts a year ago when a Labour government was elected after 14 years. And let's be clear, this wasn't in our manifesto. The Labour Party as a whole hasn't approved this, and it's being rushed through. And I think we need to be clear as well that if this were a free vote, then it would be hard to find many Labour MPs at all who were going to vote for it. It is, as my honourable friend, the Member of Parliament for York Central said, this is a matter of conscience. And we need to be clear what we're comparing here. When we decide how to vote tonight, we're not comparing the bill as the government intended with the bill as is promised. What we should be comparing is the situation of disabled people across the country as it is now, and the situation of disabled people in the country which will come to pass if this bill is passed. And this bill, which was brought, whatever the narrative, to save billions of pounds, still, with these concessions, cuts billions of pounds from disability support. No government, and no Labour government, should seek to balance the books on the backs of disabled people. That's not what any of us in the Labour family, left, centre or right of the party, came into politics to do. And that's why so many people are so uneasy about this.
By moving from second reading to third reading in 8 days, it does not give members of this House the time they deserve to scrutinise it. By denying the opportunity to have this bill in committee in this House, we're denying disabled people and their organisations time and space to give evidence to make sure that this legislation is the best legislation it can be. Because I think we'd all agree that the current system is broken. I've been a constituency MP for 10 years and I've lost count of the number of times I've sat in advice surgeries with constituents who've been failed by the current system. The need for reform is clear, but it's also clear that we need to do it in co-production with disabled people. And I come at this from a point of view of having met one of my closest friends, Zara, who's a disability rights activist now. In fact, she was when I met her when we were 18. And she taught me many things. She taught me that having a disability was no barrier to living a full and really quite exciting life. She taught me that never dance too close to someone on a dance floor of a nightclub who's in a wheelchair because you will lose a toenail. She taught me that nothing about us without us, and that is the thing she taught me that I value most, and that is the values that I approach the legislation that we have before us today. Because when we legislate for disabled people, without involving them, we make bad legislation and we make poor legislation. And I mean poor in many senses, because this bill will push 150,000 disabled people into poverty. And as a Labour MP and as someone who cares deeply about reducing poverty, that's not something that I can do.
This bill did not come from an understanding of the inequality and injustice in our society. The whole origin of this bill was a demand to save £5 billion. That £5 billion was wanted by the Defence Secretary for more armaments, and no doubt other departments as well were making demands. So the whole thing has been driven from a bad source at the very beginning. And it would be much more honest and much better if the government simply now withdrew this bill altogether and allowed the Under-Secretary's review to take place and look at the issues of poverty facing people with disabilities, looked at the issues of the huge levels of stress that many others face, such as children with special needs in schools that are not met, such as housing overcrowding when there are children with autism or other special needs that cannot be located in decent-sized housing. There's a whole area of discrimination against people with all forms of disabilities that could and should be addressed. And as the member for Lancaster just pointed out, it was a previous Labour government that introduced the disability discrimination legislation that made such an enormous difference. Going back further, it was a Labour MP, Alf Morris, that introduced the Chronic Sick and Disabled Persons Act, which made a phenomenal difference to a lot of people's lives. What has happened that whole tradition seems to have been stood on its head, and we're now presented with a piece of legislation that was going to take the personal independence payments away from a very large number of people, and instead, after the failed rebellion by some Labour MPs, the bill was changed to say that it will only be future generations that will be denied access to this, to the payments that they absolutely deserve. And so you look to a situation in the future where there's going to be very serious levels of poverty, much worse than there are now, amongst every family where there is somebody with a level of disability.
In March 2020, when the Conservative government looked like an outlier in appearing to pursue a strategy centring on herd immunity, I felt raw, hot fear. Thinking of my toddler and what might happen if I caught coronavirus meant I sobbed deeply. After 10 years of austerity, I knew then that disabled people would pay an enormous price, and they did. Almost 60% of COVID-related deaths were disabled people in that first wave. I vowed then that I would do all I could to create a country which treats disabled people with dignity and respect. The social security system was broken by the Conservative legacy of austerity and their monumental mishandling of the COVID pandemic. I am now one of the only visible physically disabled members of Parliament. I am proud that our manifesto committed to championing the rights of disabled people and the principle of working with disabled people to ensure our views and voices are at the heart of all we do. My communities nurtured me growing up, and they taught me the values of fairness, equality, community. So it is with a heavy, broken heart that I will be voting against this bill today. As a matter of conscience, I need my constituents to know I cannot support the proposed changes to PIP as currently drafted on the face of the bill before us today.
This cruel mistake of a bill must fall today. The reasons in the Green Amendment stand, and with my colleagues, I will be voting to stop it today at second reading and supporting the reasoned amendment from the Honourable Member for York Central. These proposals are a mess. The timetable is breakneck, and other honourable members have said it right. It is the spreadsheet, and the rush to get it through before the budget is a dead giveaway that this is about making cuts, not making improvements. The government's actions in this way do not respect sick and disabled people. Way before making any changes to social security, real dialogue should have taken place that respects their rights and needs. Already, 3 in 4 people who need to use a food bank have a disabled person in their household. And the bill before us today will further impoverish hundreds of thousands with cruel cuts in support.